In the Clive Barker Podcast, longtime fans Ryan and Jose interview guests, bring you the news, and take deep dives into Barker-related stuff. In episode 471, we've got some movie release news as well as some sad news. This episode is sponsored by Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. Don Bertram is a longtime friend of Clive and advocate of his art. But Don's unique and inspiring paintings are for sale, and over 50% of the proceeds go to the Arts and Medicine program at the Texas Children's Cancer Center. There's even a paver in Washington, D.C. representing Celebrate Imagination. We're thrilled that this worthy cause is sponsoring our podcast again this year, and we hope that you'll consider looking over his Pinterest page and commissioning a painting of your own. For commissions, Don requires no money down, and there will be no obligation on your part. You can also head over to the Etsy shop to buy one of his books, like A Chimney Sweep's Tale, Celebrate Imagination, or The Imaginaries. Follow the link in the show notes, or click on the side banner, and let's see what's new with Don Bertram today. On Don Bertram's Facebook page, take a look at The Truth Behind It All, The Sun Watchers, and The Descendant. Also check out his videos going over his original Clive Barker painting, The Bug Brothers, and his intro to the 35th anniversary screening of Hellraiser. Those links can be found in the show notes on our blog. Don Bertram also recently suggested an interview that we do that I'm really excited about, so I'm hoping that works out. Of course, the best way to support this podcast is through our Patreon at patreon.com/BarkerCast589. Our subscribers will get exclusive access to content not available anywhere else, like our Collector's Corner video series, rare Barker videos, and early behind-the-scenes stuff. Plus, backers in the $10 tier will also be able to choose an episode topic, and we might mail you something once in a while, depending on your location. Our supporters also get access to the exclusive channel in our Discord server. We'll be forever grateful if you consider helping us out and subscribing to our Patreon. So what's new on Patreon? Okay, well, welcome. This is episode 471 of the Clive Barker Podcast. Good evening, Jose. It's really late over there.
Hey, it's actually 9:27 p.m. here as we record this.
I guess not super late.
No.
Yeah. So I guess to start off, we want to thank our Patreon members, David Anderson, Eric Van Holt, Daniel Elvin, Amanda Stewart, and our returning sponsor, Don Bertram Celebrate Imagination. Thank you, guys. Quick thing I wanted to mention about Patreon is that we're kind of about halfway to what our goal was. And that's, I mean, with our Kickstarter projects, that's never happened before. So, I mean, we're almost to the end of the year, and so this is kind of burned through the reserves of money that we had to keep the podcast going. So, I guess unless we get more Patreon subscribers or we do something different, we're not going to be able to pay for the podcast next year going the way we're going now. So I just would like to say for any of you guys out there, if you're considering it, it would really help us out a lot, and we would appreciate that. And as far as what's new for Patreon subscribers, I know you've talked about you were working on a Hellraiser
video game post.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
I still found a few more files, so I'm still working on that. I found some storyboards for some of that virtual hell game. It will come by this weekend.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out. Yeah, and so that's kind of that'll be the most recent one. And then also we're thinking of going back to Collector's Corner again to talk about our Nightbreed collections. Because of Occupy Midian, we've got pretty good sized Nightbreed memorabilia and memories and collections, and so I think that'd be a fun episode to do. I guess we'll start off with, this is a news episode, so we're going to talk about news from the Reef. So one is that Paul Kane had posted this a few days ago, and I missed it, and so I've kind of boosted that and said, hey, Paul Kane has found some autographed copies of Hellbound Hearts that he's got available. So we've got a link there in our listeners group for our listeners. If you want to click on that, you can get an autographed copy, and it's signed by Paul Kane and Marie Reagan.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great book. It's got 21 different stories, including stories by Barbie Wilde,
Nicholas Vince,
forward by Clive Barker. There's even like a Dave McKean story in there. Neil Gaiman, I think, wrote one. So there's a lot of interesting stories in there. Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't read that since it first came out a long time ago. I think we talked about that at the beginning of our podcast, like way back.
Yeah. This came out about 3 years before we started, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so that's a good one for people to pick up if you're interested in reading, a whole bunch of eclectic group of authors writing about Hellraiser. That's perfect. I mean, you're not going to see that anywhere else except for maybe the comics. So yeah, check that out. Little Spark Films met their fundraising goal for Death World. Just wanted to kind of give them a shout out. I thought that was pretty cool. It was like at $800 towards the end, and then all of a sudden it shot up to $7,000.
It made its goal on November 1st when it hit $6,969. Yeah. And then it's just kept on piling up a few more. Like it's up to $7,051. So now this is for post-production and festival run expenses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that'll be
Congratulations.
Cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Yeah.
I ordered a Blu-ray for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that was what I wanted to have. Our main news, and lots of people have probably seen this floating around, is that there was an announcement of a movie adaptation for The Thief of Always. And no, it's not like somebody, a blog digging up an old article, digging up old information. This is a new adaptation with the director of The Babadook as helming the project.
Jennifer Kent, that's right.
Yeah.
This is kind of a weird kind of like, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah.
It comes from all these blogs and websites and stuff are just referring each other and referring this one website called World of Real. And usually the articles there, it's more of a blog. It's written by a guy called Jordan Rumi. And
it's got a lot of pop-ups on it that kind of drove me nuts.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know about this website being particularly trustworthy, especially when I started looking into more articles that he has in here, and he's complaining about woke culture and whatever. I don't know about this guy. Yeah.
But I think it's also corroborated from what people have said that Clive Barker has said at conventions and stuff.
Well, that's weird because the article, as I read it, seemed like he was just saying that he had found out that, this person who Gizmodo article said she was working on adapting a well-known horror book, but she didn't say which one. And then World of Real was the only blog that really said, well, we've heard that it's going to be A Thief of Always. But so if Clive has been mentioning that, then I guess that clinches the deal, I guess. Yeah,
well, and Clive, I mean, we've been covering him for a long time, and he will say things about projects that are upcoming that people aren't really ready to get announced yet. And so you hear about all kinds of things that they start up, but then they don't make it. And that could be what this is. I mean, just like the 3 other times that they tried to make The Thief of Always.
That's right. And I think you brought this up in a previous episode about how Bernard Rose said that 3 different studios had tried to adapt it. So now there was like a $25 million fee just to opt into that failed adaptation, right?
Right. Yeah. One of them was Bernard Rose was going to do a live action version with Universal Pictures. And then what was there was one that was animated and one that was like a sort of a Pixar style.
I got a little bit of a transcription here from our episode with Bernard Rose. So if I could just read that to you a little bit. It said he more than thought about creating A Thief of Always. He actually was developing the film quite seriously with Universal for a couple of years in the late 90s. He says, we had screenplays, departments doing drawings, and we were seriously trying to mount a production. In the end, it fell through, I think partly because it was before Harry Potter or anything like that. If we had made it, we could have taken that niche. It's a real shame we never did. And then he went on to say, he talks a little bit about the impact of Harry Potter and Clive Barker's book. But then he went to say that initially it was going to be developed as an animation at Paramount. Then that fell through. Bernard Rose developed it at Universal with Clive as a live-action movie.
Yeah.
After that, there was another attempt production with ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, as a CGI movie, but that didn't go anywhere either. And then he said, now there's so much money tied up in it from previous attempts that no one can afford to make it. You'd have to pay off 3 failed attempts by major studios, which is a huge amount, about $25 million, before you even shoot a frame. So it's probably never going to happen, which is really unfortunate. Yeah. And then I looked into how does this happen, right? Why is it that I thought that when you option a book, you approach the writer of the screenplay or the book or the author, and you option it, and you can option to make the movie. And then if you don't make the movie, the rights go back to the author, right? That's what I thought that this worked. But after I researched a little bit, it said a book option can become prohibitively expensive after multiple failed adaptation attempts due to accumulated costs and complex rights issues. And here's a few points to take in mind. One is that when the studios purchase the option for the book, they have to pay a fee to secure the adaptation rights. And then you get additional expenses with early development, writing screenplays, creating concept art, filming test scenes if they do that. So if an adaptation fails, these costs will still count as sunken costs attached to the project. When another studio wants to pick up the rights later, it might need to pay not only for the current option, but also a sum to cover the past studio's investments, which could total millions. So that's one of the ways that this happens. Of course, there's always entanglement of rights that can happen, contracts with buyout clauses and conditions that can make it complex to transfer the rights. And then,
on top of that, they feel like it's cursed, once it's been failed so many times.
Yeah, so studios might think that, hey, maybe maybe there's no good way of adapting this. I mean, for example, the Watchmen movie had a bunch of different attempts at adapting it to screenplay and failed pre-productions until they made the movie with Zack Snyder, I think. So
or Alien 3, right? How many different versions of Alien 3 were there, before they made the one that we got?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of different scripts for that one too, I think.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to hear that now this might be untangled.
I really hope that this is going to happen. But I don't know that it's good to get your hopes up, because this just feels like another one of the hundreds of announcements that we've talked about and we've gotten excited about, and then they become nothing. And there's some weird announcements, too, that we've talked about that have never become anything.
That's true, and some that I didn't think were going to turn into anything, and eventually they did, right? I mean, that thing that Hulu was going to make a Hellraiser movie, that I was like, really? I don't know about that. It was just some random website that I had never heard about.
And in
then
fact,
a few years later, there was.
2 competing projects, right? The HBO one and the Hulu one. And we all thought for sure that the Hulu one is the one that was going to fizzle out, and the HBO was going to be the one that, because at the time, HBO was making all kinds of stuff. And we thought that was the one that was going to make it. And it turned out the opposite.
But I don't want to bring this up as a way of trying to dismiss the movie or anything. I just want to keep in mind that Bernard Rose said that, but he worked in the movie in the 90s, in the late 90s. So I'm sure there's probably were more developments in terms of buyouts or optioning or contracts that might have expired. And now it's probably simpler to make The Thief of Always. So I would love to believe that is possible and that is happening. Because Jennifer Kent, she is a great director. I mean, she's got a lot of awards when she directed The Babadook. Yeah,
well, that would be cool. It would be really neat to see. I hope it kind of captures the sort of magic of that book, right? I mean, it's got kind of a built-in sort of childlike wonder to it that would be hard to recreate. But I'm excited to see where it goes.
In regards to the director, she's from Australia. She's a screenwriter and former actress. And she did The Babadook in 2014 and The Nightingale in 2018. Yeah. I've heard a lot about The Babadook. I haven't seen either of her movies. So I think this weekend I'm going to try to watch The Babadook. Because,
it's a good idea.
Watched the trailer.
I might do that too.
I watched the trailer and it looked really cool.
And Sareth reminded us, he says, Clive mentioned he was working on a part 2 of the book at Spooky Empire. He said spooky, but Spooky Empire also. And that reminded me that we talked about him writing a sequel, like earlier this year, right? He did an interview with Dread Central, I think, and he talked about 34 projects or some large number of projects.
Yeah, 31, I think.
31. Yeah, and that was one of them, was the sequel to Thief of Always. So that has been kind of in the works for a bit.
That's right. Yeah, and that interview back in the day, when was that interview? It says here it was published 8 months ago on March 8th. So It was March 8th, and Clive said, Aberrat 4 and 5 are among the books at my feet. So is the third and final book of the art and the sequel to The Thief of Always. Yeah. There are also return visits to characters and mythologies you may have thought I would never return to. I hope I am still able to surprise you in the decades ahead. I'm sure you will, Clive. I'm just looking forward to that.
Yeah. And so I guess...
Do you have any idea what kind of sequel we could get from that? Because when I think about a sequel to The Thief of Always, I'm always wondering, like, is this going to have the same characters? Is Mr. Hood not defeated?
Right, I thought he just I thought he imploded.
Yeah, I mean, evil never dies,
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if Harvey Swick would have a kids now, and that would be the continuation of the story.
That could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Rictus was gone. All of those creatures, right? Because they were all created by Mr. Hood.
That's right. So if they made a second book about that, they would have to bring Mr. Hood back in some form, or at least something equivalent to Mr. Hood.
Yeah, maybe it's Mr. Hood's wife, Mrs. Hood.
That would be terrific.
Well, that's kind of how Godzilla goes, right? I think the first one was male, and then the second movie was female.
Oh yeah. Or maybe, there's a little spark left, like Rictus found at the end of the book, right? Maybe there was another little spark, and from that spark, it's like Doom 64, everything else regenerated, and then we have to go back to Mr. Hood because he wants revenge.
Doom 64, like the Nintendo 64 version of Doom?
Yeah. Yeah, you remember that? Did you ever play that?
I don't remember. I mean, I've played lots of versions of Doom. I don't know if I remember playing that one. That one was
I just
different?
brought that up because you remember Doom 1 and 2, right?
Yeah.
So in Doom 64, at the end of the events of Doom 2, there's one monster that was never killed, okay, that can regenerate dead tissue. So that monster goes around regenerating all the monsters that you've killed in Doom 1 and 2 and making them tougher. And that's why the monsters in Doom 64 are different. And you have to fight hell again and
I had
kill
no
that.
idea. I thought it was just a fancy version of Doom.
No, it's very different. It's very different. It has different monsters, different weapons, but it's still same feel.
Well, I pre-ordered the Analogue 3D, which is an FPGA version of the Nintendo 64. So that should probably come in, 6 months or a year.
Does it? Is it also retro compatible to cartridges? Do you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what they're for.
We were talking earlier privately, and you were telling me that today was not a fun day at work. So I came up with a little game for us to do here at the podcast about The Thief of Always. Are you up for that? Right. It's a two truths and a lie. Okay. And this is going to be about The Thief of Always.
All right. Ready.
All right. First question. It's challenging. This one is a little challenging. I try to make it a little harder. Question 1. Harvey Swick is lured to the holiday house by a mysterious figure named Rictus, who promises endless fun and adventure. The second is, at the holiday house, each day brings a new season and holiday celebration. But Harvey slowly realizes this is part of a sinister trap. And the third one is, one of the most popular holiday activities for the children is visiting a magical wishing well that grants their desires. 2 truths and a lie.
Well, it seems like number 2 and number 3 are lies. Because in number 2 it says every day is a new holiday, but it's not true. It's all the holidays are in one day. It's like the day is the whole season, is the whole year.
I think you're right. Okay, well, Shucks. Well, it was number 3, so scratch that one.
Yeah, the wishing well was not a pleasant place.
But you're right. You wake up in the morning, have breakfast. It's spring. Then in the afternoon, then in the evening, it's fall, and then it's Christmas. You're right. It was on a single day, not a week. Right. All right. Well, question 2. Mrs. Griffin, one of the few adult figures at the holiday house, secretly mourns for the children trapped there and tries to warn Harvey subtly. Second one is Harvey's friend Wendell is transformed into a bizarre creature during his time at the holiday house. And 3, the children who stay too long at the holiday house begin to lose their memories and even change physically.
What was can you say number 2 again about Wendell?
Harvey's friend Wendell is transformed into a bizarre creature during his time at the holiday house.
Oh, okay, that's not true.
That's not true. That's right.
I also thought that number 1, she was Mrs. Griffith and not Griffin.
Oh, well, you know who I'm talking about. She has like the cats and stuff.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that one was supposed to be the lie because of Mrs. Griffin.
No, it was Wendell, yeah.
Okay.
It's Harvey that turns himself into a vampire, and Lulu gets turned into a fish, but Wendell never transforms into anything.
Yeah.
Question 3. Harvey eventually discovers that Mr. Hood, the master of the holiday house, is a powerful being who drains life from the children who visit. Rictus, one of Mr. Hood's helpers, is always laughing and seems to take personal delight into tricking children and to staying forever. And 3, Karna, one of the creatures at the house, is always friendly to Harvey and even tries to help him escape when he gets trapped.
Okay, no, not number 3.
It's not Karna, definitely not.
Yeah.
Karna's actually a terrifying monster. Chases Harvey trying to stop him from escaping.
Yeah.
Question 4. Harvey learns that every moment he spends at the holiday house cost him years of his life in the real world, with time moving much faster outside. Lulu, one of the children trapped at the holiday house, becomes so changed that she no longer recognizes her own family when she tries to leave. 3, Mr. Hood maintains his power and the magic of the holiday house by transforming into different objects and absorbing energy from them.
3?
It's 2. Lulu doesn't try to leave, and her family doesn't recognize her. Instead, she becomes enchanted and loses her sense of self, and she transforms into a fish.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that also, but then I don't remember Mr. Hood absorbing energy from objects.
Well, he transforms into different objects, right? From Aristotle to whatever, he creates all that stuff. Basically, he's the house and the landscape, right?
But I thought that was draining him of energy, doing that, trying to impress Harvey and the other kids.
Yeah, when he does a lot of it at once, it does drain him. That's true.
Yeah.
But that's what he uses to get the energy from the kids. Question 5. Harvey defeats Mr. Hood by tricking him into using his own magic, causing the house and everything within it to collapse. 2, when Harvey returns home, he discovers time has passed differently, and he has lost many years of his life while he was at the holiday house. And 3, the holiday house is ultimately destroyed, but Harvey takes a small token from it as a reminder of his adventure. 2 truths and a lie.
Yeah.
He defeats Mr. Hood by tricking him into using his own magic, and he collapses. Yeah. When Harvey returns home, he discovers time has passed differently, and he's lost many years of his life.
Does he not take a keepsake home? Maybe he doesn't.
No, he does not take anything. But he does grab a handful of dirt, right? And,
Yeah.
But that's at the end of the movie.
I thought that I thought he had the little figures from the Noah's Ark.
No, it's just the dirt.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the dirt. He didn't take anything. But then the guy comes over, Lulu's husband, because she's very old and she doesn't want to meet him. And then he says, "Oh, sorry, I was moving in the dirt and my hands are dirty." And he's like, "Oh, this is a healing dirt." And then he goes away. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Cool. This was fun. I hope you had a little bit of fun. I did generate some of these with ChatGPT, but anyway, that's probably why there were little glitches here and there. Don't trust AI, folks. It
can be a little insidious because it can lure you in with so much good information, but then
that's right.
Something little sneaks in there. That's not quite right.
All right.
So our last bit of news, and we just saw this when we were starting up this episode. Catalina pointed this out to us, who you'll know from, she's been on episodes with us before, and she's in our Jericho Squad episodes and stuff. But anyway, she pointed out that Tony Todd had recently passed away at the age of 69. I guess today, as we're recording this, it's Friday night.
I just pulled it up. I just pulled up the article on Variety, and I'm looking at it now. This is really, really sad. We were kind of struck at the beginning before we started the episode. We were kind of just on Zoom together, just not saying anything. Just as soon as you were like, oh, my God, I just saw this from Catalina, and we were like shocked. Yeah. The Variety article here says, Tony Todd, Candyman and Final Destination star, dies at 69. His death was confirmed by a representative for the actor. Cause of death was not disclosed. He died Wednesday at his home in Marina del Rey, California. That's very, very sad.
I remember talking to him at Mad Monster Party. He was like one of the very first like in-person interviews, and I was so nervous to talk to him. And then, like, he would kind of interrupt while we were talking, and he would talk to somebody else about where they could go to get barbecue and stuff like that. And he told me about how, about getting stung by all the bees and how he got paid for every bee sting. And
that's right.
Yeah. And Richard Mall was near us, and he kept screaming at people with this puppet of himself as the night court guy.
Oh my God, he passed away too recently.
Yeah. Yeah,
just I didn't a few days ago, didn't he?
Though. Maybe so. I can't,
oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but Tony Todd was really cool. He didn't really quite understand what a podcast was at that time, or what we were doing, but...
Well, it was early days of podcasting.
Yeah, and he would people would come up and we would have to stop so that he could sign something and then continue on. And so I was there for like 20 minutes to do this like 5-minute interview.
Yeah. What episode was that? Was that like episode 2 or 1 or?
It was, boy.
That goes back a while, right?
Yeah, it's definitely single digits. It might be 7, I think.
I remember, I think the first movie I saw with Tony Todd was The Crow. I might have seen him before in one of those action movies, like, what is it, Platoon? Is that the one that he's in?
Oh, yeah.
That's right, okay, so that might have been
He's in a lot of stuff, and you probably don't even realize it. At the time, there's all these things we've seen that he's been in, but he's so memorable as Candyman. Night of the Living Dead 1990, right? He was great in that as Ben.
Oh yeah, that's even almost in many ways more fun than the original movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like it better.
He was in Platoon, I remember that. That was the first movie I saw him in. But then I remember the movie that I really thought he was the coolest guy I've ever seen was The Crow, where he plays the heavy for the villain. Yeah. And then of course Candyman. That was really, really cool watching Candyman, because that came out
92, I think.
That's right, 92, I think. And I was already into Clive Barker stuff from Hellraiser, and I had watched Nightbreed recently, so I was like, "Ooh, Nightbreed is really cool."
I was trying really hard to read all the Books of Blood stories in order, and I really wanted to get through The Forbidden before Candyman came into theaters, and I went to see it. And I was reading like nonstop.
But and
it was also the same time as Hellraiser 3 was out in theaters. I think that and Candyman were together.
It's heartbreaking, and I recommend people go listen to our episode with Bernard Rose, because Bernard Rose also was a good friend of Tony Todd. Yeah. And Tony Todd had made a film with Bernard Rose where he was going into Skid Row, and actually he was looking for his own son who was addicted and living on the streets.
And it was kind of capturing the time of the pandemic and stuff, which we've all kind of, I mean, even though COVID still exists, but we've all kind of sort of collectively wiped it from our minds in a way, right? It's like another lifetime almost, even though it was only a few years ago.
Yeah, it's been 4 years already. And
yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few years.
I think about my son being at home, on a computer for an entire year instead of going to school. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like that really happened. It
feels unfair. A bunch of kids who never got to have the proper experience of what going to school is like. Or
the kids that were in their graduating class, right? And then they couldn't have graduations.
But here we go. We lost Tony Todd, and it's really sad. And I think I'm going to go watch Candyman.
Oh, yeah.
This weekend.
And actually, because I have the 4K version of the new 2021 Candyman, and I just watched that recently. And because he's got a cameo in the end.
That's right. The bees turn into his face.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I didn't want to end in such a bummer note. This is really sad.
Well, and we did have one sort of discussion question that somebody from Reddit brought up. They said, "What is Clive Barker's top-selling horror novels?" So, I mean, he meant what are, I'm sure, but top-selling horror novels, and that got me thinking. I never really knew, or is that even a thing that you can look up? I don't know what his top selling. I mean, we know which ones seem like have more critical acclaim, right, than others, but I don't know if I know which ones sold more.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say, as a speculative idea for me, probably the Hellbound Heart.
The Books of Blood.
Sure, the Books of Blood. I mean, if you want to go by just any kind of publication or actual novels, and then of course,
the Books of Blood catapulted
big.
Him into the limelight, sort of, as a writer.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then Weave World and Imagica and The Thief of Always. Those are big hitters for like Clive Barker novels. But you raise a good point. I wonder, at least on Amazon, is there a way to rank? I'm curious because I never really used Amazon in that way.
Yeah,
but that's a good question.
Well, and it's tricky because there's been reissues of all these books. So, or what are we talking about? Right? Are we talking about on their first printing when they first came out? Which one did the most? It's because
I would say combined, right?
Yeah,
combine multiple editions for each.
Well, and
that's
that's not fair to the newer books. But and
sure.
It's because like with movies, they can look at the opening weekend box office, and that's how you can compare one movie against another movie. But you can't really do that with a book.
I don't think you can. I was trying to see how to rank by best-selling. I can rank by best-selling books or best-selling authors, but I don't think I can find a way to rank an author's books on how much they're selling. I think that information is kind of hard to get, right? I mean, even back in the day when we were buying paperbacks off of stores instead of off of the computer. But back in the day, it was, I don't think we ever knew. I mean, unless they released something saying, hey, we're celebrating that Weave World sold 30 million copies or 5 million copies or whatever copies.
And it was all more like, it was on the New York Times bestseller list for this many weeks or whatever. I mean, and you hear that about a lot of books. So I don't really know how you can compare, how that's even a way to compare books against each other.
Right, but that's a good question. Maybe direct that to Phil and Sarah at Revelations or the Clive Barker Archive. Maybe they would have an interesting feedback on that. I don't know. I don't even know if authors like to put that information out there to know which books were least successful, which books were more successful.
Right.
I feel like that kind of knowledge could be limiting to a book, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and when you think about which books have been reissued the most, probably the Books of Blood and Thief of Always,
or the books were still in print, right? I think Clive Barker's mostly in print, except for those smaller things like Chiliad, Adaptation, or stuff like that. I think those were, you can still get them on your ebook Kindle thing. But
right, yeah, and so that's a whole other metric, right, that didn't exist back then. And then there's audiobooks, which were physical to start with,
right.
and now they've been all kind of translated into like Audible versions.
That's right. So we've established that it's a complex question that might not have a real answer.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what it is. Yeah.
All right. But that's I would like to go back to what you were saying earlier about Clive Barker announcing already that Jennifer Kent is that he might be working with her to develop that. That's exciting, right? I mean, I just when you said that, I didn't know that. I hadn't heard anything about that. I just thought it was the only source was this blog post.
Well, I was just seeing it in comments under where people were posting this blog post. I was seeing people saying, "Oh yeah, Clive said that at such and such, convention."
Yeah. So interesting. Okay. So yeah, I was very skeptical before we started recording, but as soon as you brought that up and those comments, then I guess this is probably at least in the works. Let's see what happens to it.
Yeah. But, I mean, we also had Jacqueline S. movie with Lena Headey, right? They'd even picked an actress for that.
That's right.
That didn't work.
Yeah, I think that was what we saw was probably like the pitch that they were trying to sell the movie with.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like something that was in pre-production. I think it was more like a glorified pitch for see if anybody could get producers that would be willing to invest in that. And I don't think that ever materialized. So
right.
Looks like those $25 million that Bernard Rose spoke about probably expired. So that's good.
Or maybe it's just not as much anymore. Maybe there's still sunken costs, but maybe not as many. Maybe some of those companies have merged or gone away. And
Godspeed, Tony Todd. I know
that's put a damper on everything. I mean, but it's really sad.
Yeah, I hope we can find out a little more.
He wasn't that old.
Not at all. But that's life, and it's sad, man. I'm gonna be grieving this weekend about this. Let's do the best we can to keep the memory of these actors alive in our hearts and in our minds and in our culture.
Yeah. And
that's all we can do.
There's in Baldur's Gate 3. There's the god of bones, Myrkul, comes to life, and you have to fight him. And I swear to God, I think it's Tony Todd's voice. Maybe we'll we'll find a YouTube video of, but that part is super cool.
Oh, Tony in the TV tropes lists Tony Todd as Myrkul's avatar, uncredited. Characters in Baldur's Gate 3, gods of Faerun. Or Faerun. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Faerun.
I guess that's it for this episode.
Yeah. Well, we'll say what's coming next. We've got... we're going to try to go over the Disc 4 of the Quartet of Torment. We just need to kind of try to schedule that with Pete Atkins. Hopefully we can get him back to talk about Hellraiser Bloodline. We'd like to get that Collector's Corner Nightbreed video done for our Patreon subscribers. And we'll come back to Jericho Squad one more time, I think, at least before the end of the year. And more interviews. We've got a couple of ideas for interviews, and actually there's one I wanted to talk to you about that we hadn't talked about yet. So we'll do that after we stop recording. And the Book Club of Blood, Midnight Meat Train, will be our next one. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And I put out a question for people. I wanted to see what people thought of the Book Club of Blood. I thought it was really fun, and Jose, you replied to that. But I wanted to see also what our listeners think. Is that about that format? Because it's something new that we hadn't done before.
I had a lot of fun meeting Eric Van Holt. It was great talking to him from Amsterdam and hearing about his own website and the podcast that he was in. So that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed meeting Eric. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, that was awesome. All right. Well, in this podcast, having no beginning will have no end. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have subscribed. You can find the Clive Barker Podcast wherever you find audio. Show notes for this episode, as well as news and reviews, can be found at our website at www.clivebarkercast.com. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial podcast and blog that is not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans. You can chat with us on our Facebook BarkerCast listeners group, our Facebook page, Twitter, or our Discord server. The best way to support us is to buy our book, The BarkerCast Interviews, Occupy Midian, available in hardcover on Amazon and ebook on Amazon and Apple Books. Fundraiser 10 is all about Patreon this year. Become a patron to get access to exclusive stuff, pick an episode topic, and maybe even get cool stuff in the mail. You can also buy a t-shirt on our TeePublic store. Go to tpublic.com and search for BarkerCast. Leave a message for us using the SpeakPipe link on our blog. Opening and ending music generously provided by Ray Norrish.
Thanks for listening.